Hello everyone, I hope you had a good lunch and you're still awake for, I hope, one of the most interesting panels today. So today I have many interesting guests today here. Some of them are from Ukraine, some of them were working and are still working in Ukraine, some of them will continue working in Ukraine in the next couple of months. And we will today discuss the topic of importance of the factual reporting on the Ukraine at the moment. So I don't want to introduce all of you at the beginning. I will let that to you. So first of all, I would like you all to... Before we start, just need to say that we have one empty chair today. Journalist Anastasia Stanko from Ukraine should have been with us today, but unfortunately, one of her colleagues and friends died on the front line a few days ago, so she unfortunately wasn't able to join us today. But we can start now. So first of all, I want to ask all of you, what do you do specifically in the context of the war in Ukraine, and if you could maybe shortly remember and share with us some story or experience that you saw or witnessed and which can describe us what is actually happening in Ukraine at the moment. So whoever wants to take a floor.
The only Ukrainian. Okay, I will take the floor. Hi guys, my name is Irina Shvets. I'm Ukrainian and I'm still working in Ukraine for the civil society organization. We were doing a lot of electoral matter stuff. We're mostly known as election observation, domestic mission. We also elaborate legislation, electoral code, and do monitoring campaigns. But actually now, civil society in Ukraine has to somehow adapt to the new reality after February 24th. And of course, we are doing currently a lot of volunteering job. So I got familiar with different models of helmets, bulletproof vests, all this stuff that we are trying to support. Also my colleagues who are now on the front line and serve in the eastern part of Ukraine, also on the border with Belarus and other regions of Ukraine. In early March, part of the team, ladies, because men are not allowed to cross the border, actually. So 3 of us moved to Poland, to Warsaw. We are now communicating and cooperating with the General Prosecutor's Office in Poland and with local prosecutor's office, and we will establish the Public Center for War Crimes Documentation. Actually, this is the center that with the main aim to gather, collect information from the victims and eyewitnesses who have some experience, who actually witnessed the war crimes in Ukraine. So this is, in a nutshell, about the plans and how the life changed after the war.
Hi everybody, my name is Una. I work as a digital broadcast editor for Balkan service of Radio Free Europe. So I don't actually work in Ukraine, but we work on Ukrainian topic ever since the war started and before. We worked on the build-up of army and all of the others. Like we started with a live blog, that was kind of the main point of my work at the beginning of everything. We continued to work from Poland at some point. Me and Ayla went to Warsaw to try to find to write about female perspective of a war and how it is when you move forcefully from your country. I also work on podcast production of all of the other kind of contextual things that you can contribute. But the thing that you asked about the personal moment of everything. So we were at the Polish bus station, and there was this it's mild moment comparing to the war and to everything what is happening. But the bus came and people went from the bus, and then they just changed the label and said Warsaw, Lviv. So it was like, I don't know, it was 50th day of war. and people are returning to Ukraine, to country in a war. And I don't know, like that kind of hit me so much at that moment. Like the hopelessness of the situation and everything that, we all saw that in Bosnia as well. People, returning at the beginning of 90s thinking nothing's going to happen, it's going to be okay. And then you end up in a 4 years long war. And so many people, were returning that night from that station where we were. And you start to think, 30 years have passed. Did we learn anything? Like, did anything change? And I know that comparing to all of the things that people see in reporting in Ukraine, actually it's like super mild, but it's like it's really hopelessness that that I experienced at that moment. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ayla. I work as a digital media editor for RFE's Balkan service. Having said that, we cover daily news, videos and everything, but apart from that, we also work on identifying topics or narratives that we can use and somehow produce for more people to see. I know also from your questions, we'll come to that later, but so that's also one of the important questions, not just the daily news, but also the context, what has been happening before, why is this happening, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, that's one thing. And the second thing, as Una said, the personal effect was also in Poland, doing stories about refugees, is the similarities that you see. I mean, we had a family, 2 mothers and 4 children, and then the oldest, he was a teenager, the oldest guy, Zhenya, he said, I've just turned 16 and my grandfather just bought me a motorcycle. All I dream about, this is nice, thank you to the people who are here having us in Poland and doing everything, but all I dream every night is just going back and riding that motorcycle because it's a world for me, means a world for me. And to these people, they're supposed to be in school, not waiting for the connection to see, if it's going to be online, are we going to be able to study today, and all of that. Being in Poland, you don't speak Polish, so you cannot go to this school. So the children is what struck me the most, because also it's very relatable, because I come from Bosnia, and also we were also in the same position, so how nothing changes, and you are reliving these moments through these people. Why is this happening again and again?
So hi, my name is Jakub. I'm the co-founder of Outriders. We are a digital media independent outlet based out of Warsaw, Poland. And we specialize in covering things which do not happen in Poland for Polish audience. And first of all, we cover Ukraine since basically day one of our existence, which is 4.5 years ago. We produce podcasts, we produce the weekly magazine, and we also produce longer, in-depth, interactive projects. As for me, myself, I have arrived to Ukraine a week before the war has begun. The big war has begun, because the other war, I don't know how to call it, has been lasting for 8 years, and we should not forget about it. And I have stayed in Ukraine with just a couple little breaks until basically the first days of May, so that's 2.5 months. And during this time, I have myself produced primarily podcasts, but also assisted others from my team producing different stories, whether it's photo reportages, and so on. We currently, as the organization, have 11 people based out of Ukraine. 3 of them are Polish. 8 are Ukrainian journalists who also support, and we produce a very specific project called Eyes on Ukraine for Polish audience, with many reporters spread all over. And I was trying to think about that personal story, but I decided not to share.
Thanks. So I'm Jeremy Drucker, the Director of Transitions, which is based in Prague. And in terms of what we've been doing, I guess I would have to think of our 2 main roles. We are an online magazine, so we've been trying to cover what's going on in Ukraine, both with firsthand accounts and also with analysis, but we're also a journalism trainer. So together with Jakub, we had a road trip to Odessa and then to Kharkiv about 2.5 years ago with a bigger group of trainers working with local and regional media. So I think probably for both of us that those memories are still firmly in our heads. It wasn't that long ago, and we never obviously thought something like this would happen. In terms of personal moment, I think at some point I was feeling we weren't doing enough simply by covering the conflict, and I don't know if I have, more of an activist side to my background or whatever it was, but we decided to start a fund, try to raise money through crowdfunding to help journalists who are covering the war. I guess that was my personal moment. We had had these experiences in Ukraine. My grandparents were from Ukraine, friends there, colleagues, and we ended up raising about $50,000, which is not a huge amount of money compared with some of the funds that were raised, but we simply wanted to go beyond just covering the conflict and also trying to support some of the people having, very, very difficult time doing it. So I'll just finish there for now.
Thank you, everyone. We'll definitely get back to all of the things that you mentioned. First thing that I want to ask you when it comes to the reporting from, but also on Ukraine, is what do you find the most challenging? Is it the factual reporting, like being the factual while reporting, the picking the important stories, or something else?
I mean, factual reporting, of course, but that's a challenge in everyday reporting on any other issue, I would assume. The way we work, we always try to find, more than one source. We are kind of heavy on background, on context. We are trying to do all of our pieces like that. So I'm kind of thinking, in doing all of that, you are trying to do your best to escape the possibility to publish something that is not factual. That's something that I don't know. I guess you can do, and we are doing. Personal stories, of course, as Ayla was mentioning, the stories that we were doing in Poland. That's, of course, it's hard, but it's something that it's also, I think, quite necessary to portray. I don't know, like the families that were living in Poland. They are Ukrainian refugees living in Poland. You want to show that how everyday life is for the people whose entire life has been taken away from them. But that's also quite hard to accomplish, I would say. If you would. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one of the big struggle.
No, you go, I'll go after you.
One of the big struggles is actually how much to show. Should you blur this, because it's really it's really disturbing, and you might have children watching it on social media. How does that affect to them? How to decide? So basically, there is not actually we didn't come up with a playbook, okay, we do this like this. No, it's a case by case decision, and we go editorially see if this might be. I mean, this is the war. This is what's actually happening. You want the people to see it, but also, you don't want to traumatize probably younger viewers. So that's a big struggle. And then we decided from a video to a video, from a gallery to a gallery, because it's really been hard. It's also hard for you to watch, let alone for the audience, and to explain also to all of them. And then, I mean, when you publish it, you see people commenting how about everything is staged. So you're thinking, I should just play it, everything. It's very hard also for you, and also for how the audience is going to react.
So may I add? Okay, so there's a couple of things here. So first of all and I think we have to remember that we've just last week we've crossed 3 months of the beginning of the Russian invasion. So number one challenge from the field perspective is adapting to really fastly changing conditions. This war was different in the first month, it was different during the second month, it is now different in the third month, and you have to adapt to it, meaning where are you based, what kind of skills are needed from a journalist, and now we go into challenge number 2, which is the scope of the war. This is not only a big war in terms of the military scale of it, if you think about this from editorial perspective, there's so many topics you can do. Because you can either focus currently on the eastern part, southern eastern part, and really stay, let's say, with with the army perspective. You can focus on cities which left the occupation and villages. You can, but you know, the fact that Lviv is far away from the military conflict doesn't mean that it's not affected. It's also a story. The third thing is taking into account a very simple factors, which is journalists' fatigue, you know, which is being tired, being, frankly speaking, fucking exhausted after some time, not only because it's a huge physical demand from you to cover it, and I'm speaking from a non-Ukrainian perspective. So when we cooperate with our Ukrainian colleagues, we have to be very empathetic to the fact that it's also their country. So it's absolutely different feelings for them. Many, if not most of, if not all of them, have lost someone already, or they know that someone who has lost, and their lives are effectively maybe not ruined, but drastically altered. So that's, I think, those couple things which I would add to this, you know.
Thank you. You said that factual reporting is, of course, always the most important aspect of reporting. What I'm interested in is how do you approach the Russian propaganda coming from official sources? By that I mean the disinformation messages and narratives that are coming from the politicians or from the institution announcements. We as a fact-checker community saw that as one of the biggest problems at the moment, because the media outlets, at least in Bosnia and in this region, mostly just republish whatever the official sources said without saying anything about it. How do you handle those things, and what do you think should be done?
Well,
Okay, sorry.
you go.
We are kind of also in a little bit privileged position, let's call it like that, in comparing to other media, because we do have Ukrainian service, we have Russian service, we have people on the ground, we have our own, journalists and sources who we turn to. But in terms of, let's say, statements, I don't know, Sergei Lavrov or somebody giving a statement for some agency, we are also not publishing news that are based only on one statement. It's a news. It's okay. It's that statement, but it's also context in which that has been said. What is happening? What are the information around that event? I guess that's kind of what you can do. You put the statement in a context, not just in the terms of Russia, in terms of everything. Yeah.
We have made an editorial decision for the time being not to quote any Russian sources. As hard as it sounds, we do think that Ukraine is the victim in this, and we are basically on this side. We think, that whatever they say, it's poison, and we are not trying to spread it, and that's our approach to it.
Okay, so we also have a standards editor that will issue, from time to time guidance on how to report on this, how to report on Bucha, how to report on Mariupol and stuff like that. So first and foremost, you have to follow you cannot demote like invasion and war to conflict and etc. So that's very basic. But then fighting Russian propaganda, I would say. Since we're not a fact-checking platform per se, obviously we're media, so I feel that whatever you do, however you interpret, however you bring the news, there will always be the people who will just not believe you. They will just say you're just lying. So with this kind of people, there is not much you can do. But there are a lot of people who are in the corner, just watching the conflict, haven't made up, actual stand on the conflict, on the war. Sorry. So these are the people that you also want to target. You want to come to them first before the other side. So I have to say it's been a tad easier by blocking some of the sites, Russian media, but still, you have to do it every day. You have to republish it anytime. But luckily, that's why you publish full piece, full context. Why is this happening? How the invasion started? What was the narrative around it? You explain the narrative, the rationality, why is it wrong, why is it completely mistaken. And then when another disinformation shows, it's easy for you to just repost and republish that story that is, evergreen, that it's not just newsy. So also think of that content that you can always be, reusing, that can make your life a bit easier. And other than that, yeah, it's an everyday struggle.
And what do you think why a lot, and when I say a lot, I really mean a lot of media outlets, at least here in our country and in the region, are doing that? Is it just because of the clicks and the readings of the articles that will be published, or they think it is that they should republish whatever official source said, or is there any other reason behind it?
I cannot meddle in their policies. Like I don't know what they do, but
I think they don't
it's-
have
yeah,
policies,
but-
simply.
Yeah.
They don't have policies.
Yeah.
There is very few outlets which actually have a position of like standard editor or someone like this. It's an official source in a way, so they quote it. I think it's more dumb in a way, just than being part of it, It's just lack of thinking, I would say.
Yeah, but as you said, they want to be fast. They want to clicks. They want. You need to.
But I think it's, if before Irina you go, I think it's a broader challenge which we have seen many countries face. It was a situation in the United States with Donald Trump, how to approach him in a way. It's when you have an officially elected politician who starts to fuck with the system and spreads lies, what should media do? Because those politicians will tell you, you have to say what we say, you have to quote us. And media will tell you, but we are not here to spread lies just because you said it. And I think this is actually a very big challenge in general for media these days to decide what kind of a role they want to have. And it's an easy way out when you say, we're just quoting official sources, but you may end up quoting just liars. So is a purpose of a journalism outlet to spread lies? No. The game is changing, and politicians were first to notice it, that it's so easy that they tweet, and then whatever they will tweet, it ends up just being boosted by media. And it's in a way maybe contradictory to the traditional journalism role, not to quote an officially elected politician, but that's the situation we are in. So that's my thinking.
Maybe that is one of the things that has changed in the previous 10 years as we were discussing.
There was this very powerful moment, I don't remember, I think it was maybe NBC, when they just cut off Trump. And I think in the media industry, that moment has been analyzed a lot. It was it generated really, let's say, polarized opinions that you shouldn't do it, that you should do it. But the effect of it is that I think many media worldwide started to think, okay, well, maybe, why not, actually, in the end, So just because you just cannot spread it. And you see this happening in more and more media right now.
I'm not a journalist myself, but just from the side of the audience. I would also support Kuba because I think that, it really takes a lot of efforts to do some analysis. Because it's not only reporting, it's not only about showing the picture, but it's also about producing the value, sharing values. It's about providing the context. So it's a very easy way just to copy-paste the tweet or whatever. And we also experienced that in Ukraine, okay? The president said, the first lady, the prime minister, whoever. And it's an easy way because it doesn't take any analytical efforts. But now the new format of media, it just cannot work like that because you have to have a team of analysts, of fact checkers, of those who support the quality of the journalist, and also to make sure that the journalist standards are in place. So I wouldn't say that those media, of course, they will be read by some of the audience, but whether they're going to have a long life and whether they're going to be trusted for a long period of time.
I'm always for waiting a little bit and double checking or waiting for the source that you trust rather than publish it immediately. Because as you said, environments changed, everything changed with Twitter, with Trump, with deep fakes, with everything. it's really easy to make a mistake, but also you just need to, include a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of, asking yourself, is this really, if it's, what I learned in life, if it's too good, to be true, it's not, it's not true.
Yeah, but I don't want. I mean, this is this is my personal opinion, but I think this war is actually very well covered in general, and I wouldn't like to go us into direction that yes, there are some nuances which of course could be done better. But first of all, there was a lot of journalists present on the ground on February 24th because that was a very well advertised possibility that the war may start. So a lot of journalists from very many foreign media outlets came. Those who were not allowed, and I think that there was an unofficial number that at some point, maybe 2 weeks into the war, there was around 1,500 foreign journalists working from some places in Ukraine. Another 1,000 was working from Poland. They couldn't get in for two reasons. One was that simply visa. There was a lot of people, journalists from Taiwan. Simply Ukrainian border guard had different problems than issuing visas. Second, it's simply their companies didn't allow them to enter war zone. Sorry. So that's actually a lot of journalists. There's the other thing is that huge presence of Telegram, a lot of citizen sources, a lot of CCTV footage. And I think what's very interesting to observe is how the OSINT community is actually very much active in analyzing different sources provided by citizens. So, I mean, listen, most of the people, at least in Poland, are currently military experts. That's what we were laughing at lunch. That at least our conversations in Eastern Europe start with naming different guns which are being shipped to Ukraine, and we compare them between this is actually a nice anti-aircraft missile system, not bad. So, and it's also crazy when you think about it that we are having those conversations, but we do, so this is the reality. But going back into reporting, I have to say, think about it. We are almost, 100 today? Gonna be what, today, tomorrow, and still Ukraine for many media is topic number one. I don't remember a situation like this, and when it comes to events.
You go first, I was talking before.
It's okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to second that because if we remember anything from Syria, you can remember examples where the journalists went undercover to work there. Here, after the chaos of the beginning, the war started, and then the Ministry of Interior of Ukraine started issuing visas in 24 hours, even during the weekend. So journalistic presence is actually, I was very surprised by the information that you can, if you want, that you can get to.
Yeah, just a quick point. I would just distinguish, because Jakub said the war has been very well covered, and I would really distinguish between the news reporting and the opinion or commentary. Because I don't follow the US media as much as I used to, but from what I've heard, it's very often the same talking heads, former government officials, think tankers, usually with some kind of political agenda. They're paid to push that. Many times they don't have experience actually in Ukraine or in the region. The same, I follow more closely the Czech media and also was talking to a Czech expert yesterday about this. The circle of people that are shown on, say, Czech media is actually very small, but sometimes you find people there for completely mysterious reasons who don't seem to really know the region, have any experience. The guy I was talking to yesterday said he asked some Czech journalists about that, and they said they didn't want to be accused of only relying on a small circle of commentators. So then they would try to grab, individuals who didn't really have the expertise to add some kind of diversity to it. So again, I would agree. I think the reporting's been really good. We can talk maybe a bit later about some of the framing of it. Has not been as great, but the opinion, I'm not so sure. The kind of expert commentary, a mixed bag.
One of the things that, Irina, you mentioned is that while republishing the official statements and announcements from Russian sources, from a journalist perspective, you have a finished piece of news. You have a complete article, you just copy, paste, and publish, and that's it. You need only a minute for that. And we are seeing, at least I'm seeing here in our region, that we have a lot of Russian pieces of information in very different formats and sources. So we have Russian officials talking for the news agencies, but we also have a lot of other pundits or people connected to the government or not, who are talking in podcasts, talking in very different interviews, social media sources, and they are, I would say, flooding the information ecosystem, at least here. While on the other hand, what we are seeing is the other side. I mean, the information from the other side is not that that present in the media ecosystem here. What do you think about it globally? Is it something that I notice here in our region, or is it something that is same in the world globally?
You know, Russia propaganda was supported with millions of dollars for many, many years. Of course, they have their own structures, they have their own channels. So this is something that Ukraine definitely cannot conquer in 3 months or whatever. There were some tries. Of course, the good thing is that Russians are not allowed to travel. Because of like my observations of the previous years, especially those after the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, is that a huge number of so-called gongos, also activists and also journalists, they were occupying all possible conferences, providing comments to all possible international news, and they were the spokesperson. So now you're saying that there are like a lot of comments here, but what I observe compared to the situation in previous years, they're not so massive. And at least the voice of Ukrainians, the president, the government, also like civil society, because we also do a lot of advocacy on the international level, at least it is heard.
We were just talking about the bubble that I created on my social media, so I don't. No, but I wanted to, yeah, I agree with you, but we also see a lot of like Ukrainian officials and everybody like on Twitter. If you follow, you know, you can see the official statements by their government. That's like something, you know, it's everywhere all the time. So I don't know how or why they would choose to publish or report on the Russian side of news only, because this is available as well.
It could be just the bias of the media that are choosing.
But at least it's not that hard to get a comment on a Ukrainian official. Let's say we had recently the mayor of Lugansk, and then there was fighting in Severodonetsk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Sorry if I'm not. And then we got a comment in our Ukrainian service. We got a comment on that day on what's the situation in the city, how it's. So it's also, if you want it, I mean, it's basically a few phone calls away. We also did that when reporting on some stories. We also called some civil society in Kiev. From a taxi ride, we were recording him in a taxi, and the lady, she could talk to us. She had internet, so at least you can get it out there. But also during the first days of war, we saw a lot of reporters actually on Twitter, on Instagram, and also if you really want to, there's a very simple thing called as the geotag, you know, if you're an active user, so you can get to the information. And now with the internet, there are a lot of information also from Ukrainian side. So what you're gonna consume is completely up to you.
The next topic I want to touch is the security of the journalists as well as the war crimes happening in Ukraine. I already said that Nastya Stanko is not with us here today, but I have to say that she had two very bad situations while reporting in or from Ukraine. In 2014, she was detained by the Russian police because of accidentally crossing the Russian border. And just a couple of days after that, her and together with her colleague were taken hostage by the Lugansk People's Republic. I want to ask you, what do you think about the security of the journalists reporting primarily from Ukraine, not really on Ukraine because they're out of the country, but what is the situation with the security of the journalists in the Ukraine?
Well, at this stage, it really depends on the journalist's experience and what they're trying to do. So, I mean, you have to remember one thing. For a non-Ukrainian reporter currently working in Ukraine, it's job. I'm sorry if it sounds bad, but it's job. And in order to do your job, you have to be prepared for it on many aspects. If you want to actively report from a combat zone, you need proper training, you need physical fitness, you need to be able to withstand situations in which you will find yourself, and you have to be okay knowing that basically any moment you can die. And you have to be aware of this fact very much. It's different than you wake up to the war in a place which was not supposed to be a place of war, which many journalists, I think, faced on 24th, because everyone was anticipating that if something is going to happen, it's most likely going to be the eastern Ukraine, not the whole Ukraine. So there is, of course, as in any war, a lot of journalists is already dead and has died already. What you have to know is that Russians don't give a fuck whether you have press written on you, and they will shoot at you. Frankly speaking, it actually may inspire them to shoot at you. If they see, I don't know, that you have press on your car or something like this, it really doesn't matter. So that would be, I would say, when it comes to this security, very physical. Right now, it's a choice of journalists to be there, and I would urge simply a lot of journalists to really think if they are prepared for it, especially if this is a first time, because unfortunately, we have a lot of hero journalists coming. That's one of the bad sides of this war. It's not Syria. It's very easy to get into Ukraine right now. It's very easy to build up your career. You know, it's very easy to say like, oh, I'm in Ukraine covering the war. So here is me contradicting what this is tempting for many journalists to try this. But right now, covering this war, either from Donbas or from Kherson, is, if you are close to combat areas, it's very dangerous. But again, I would urge and try to say that this is a choice of journalists, what kind of stories they produce and when they are what they are getting themselves into. This doesn't differ from any other war, frankly speaking. For a reporter, you have to make sure that you are okay with losing your life, sometimes accidentally, because you are somewhere and there is shelling, or there can be even a missile which was shot down by Ukrainian air defense, but parts of it hit you. It's unlucky, but the chances of it are, of course, much higher than in a non-war situation. So, yeah, I would say, actually, it's a problem that Ukrainian army doesn't allow so many journalists to join them, because there are very experienced reporters who specialize in combat reporting, and I really would like to I use the term combat reporting, which means that a reporter goes with the army to an active military operation. So it's not like you stay in the base. It's not like you are not even on the front line, or even just behind the front line. And that's actually, I think it's a problem. We try to raise it. There are reporters who are experienced in it, and of course they know what they get themselves into. But I think this is actually a missing perspective. We of course understand why army would refuse it, but I think we will see that happening when, unfortunately, there will be when the war will be losing interest among different audiences. Most likely, Ukraine will open up to this and allow more reporters to be much closer to this. So, yeah.
Our colleague was killed a few weeks ago from the Ukrainian service, Vera Hiric. She was a producer for the Ukrainian service of RFERL, and it happened in Kiev. It wasn't even on the east of the country, so it's the war and the country is under attack. You have to be really, I mean, I cannot talk a lot about safety because I was not there, but she was, and she's someone who was working, you know, with you. And
Yeah, as far as I know, the missile hit her apartment, and that's the way she passed away. But actually, yeah, I would like to support Jakub because, you know, the Russian war is Ukraine. I think, you know, we should understand that there are no rules of war that, you know, Russians are even trying to keep to. And when we are saying that, you know, the debate of the press can be, you know, that Russian actually didn't give a damn whether you're a journalist or whoever, you know, it is the same situation with the Red Cross or whoever, you know, who just, okay, Russians are shelling on these like green corridors because they didn't give a damn whether it is civilians or not. And it really makes fun for them to shoot a journalist. Until now, I think like the recent numbers of the losses in the journalist environment is 28 or 27, 28 journalists. 7 of them were actually on the battlefield, and so they were killed because of their professional activity. And the rest of them, of course, they were either hit somehow, you know, by the missile in the apartment or whatever, or they joined the regular army forces, and they decided that apart from being a journalist, they will also defend the country as a serviceman. So basically, you know, there is no rules of war in this war. So because I think that at some point we think that, okay, there are like two sides, they're attacking, but come on, in like Kharkiv region, eastern part, Russians are using phosphorus bombs, you know? So it's something that, you know, when we are talking about the war crimes, you know, we always think that this is only refers to the military guys. But no, you know, it's, again, war crimes, civilians, journalists who are doing their professional activity. Also, we should speak about the crimes against humanity, you know, because of these photos, the pictures that we saw from Bucha, from Irpin, from Mariupol. Yeah, the world is terrified, of course. But now, you know, nothing has changed much there, except for the bodies that are now in the refrigerators, not on the places.
We published last month, I think, a documentary from our journalists, Ukrainian, and I think people also from Current Time, the TV that we are working on with the cooperation with Voice of America. You see there journalists who are working, and some of them did go with the army and to the front line and did the reports. I mean, you see how dangerous it is, and you see all of the, you know, the challenges that they have to face with to do the report and to take care of their own safety at the same time. I mean, it's horrible.
But can anything be done in order to protect journalists more? If we have a war without rules, can anything be done? Or, as Jakub, you said, the journalists should prepare themselves better and more in order to protect themselves?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, so first, not much, frankly speaking, not much. I think, you know, basically, you just, in the past decades, you know, it's very costly to be a war reporter in general. It's costly not only in terms of the equipment, of how much time you spend, you don't send many stories, and then, well, frankly, you may die and your company has legal problems with it and they have to pay you a lot of money. So that's another reason, if you notice, a lot of big mainstream media actually uses freelancers, because there's no direct ties, and that's actually a different kind of a conversation, maybe even for a different event, but I am actually very much disgusted by it, you know, because this allows you, like, if everything goes well and you get Pulitzer, then it's yay, but if someone dies, like, well, sorry, you know, they weren't actually working for us. just that this was a freelance contract, it wasn't. But it's a different conversation. So I would say rapidly change the way how we train journalists. If they want, I mean, covering conflicts, revolutions, protests, any civil unrest, then making a very clear distinction that war is a different situation. And then, whatever training you have no idea what will you do when an artillery missile explodes 200 meters from you. And until that moment, you don't know if you have the stomach to do it, frankly speaking. And just training can, as in every training, it can prep you for certain things, but for this specific situation, no. But there is plenty of stories to be done from Ukraine, you know, right now about Ukraine. You have to also see, for Poland, it's also a domestic issue right now. You know, in many countries, it's a domestic issue because this invasion is generating effects which are maybe no longer tied into what was started in February and March, because the politics is reshaping. And we see this in many European countries, you know, whether it's Poland, Germany, France, UK, and so on, it is changing many things. So you have refugee stories, you have women stories, you know. It's hard to determine how many, for example, Ukrainian refugees is currently still in Poland. I think there was this number of 3.5 million at some point. I think it's much less right now. But for example, 96% of those people were women and children, which is another, you know. In my daughter's, she's in the first class, yes. First class, you know, she had 16 students, now she has 21, you know. And she speaks this funny children Ukrainian also. Because there's 5 new students there, and she, I mean, I wasn't there, but you know, the teachers were just using Google Translate on the phone, just trying to get this. The power of kids is they don't need to understand the language. They communicate very well through fun activities and so on. And so I would say this, but you know, this is specifically about conflict. The other thing is, you know, how important this is going to be, what will editors do, what kind of stories you can tell. So that's basically what I think about it. You know, I would divide that this is really plenty of topics to be done, not necessarily demanding from you to be a war reporter. I don't want to say that, you know, everyone has to be. No, frankly speaking, if you say this, that you don't have stomach for it, it's absolutely fully respectful. And don't get me wrong, I didn't go too close to some real danger. You know, I have been in dangerous situation, but my colleagues went further in because I just couldn't bear it. But, you know, if you go too much inside without being like saying, well, maybe, then you become a problem, either for your colleagues or for Ukrainian military service who will have to go inside and take you out, or for, I don't know, medics who will maybe have to take care of it, you know, just because you were like, I mean, this is not mountain climbing, you know, where you are like, okay, that's my challenge and so on, you know. Any decision you make in such situation is most likely going to, if something goes wrong, will have an effect on others people. So I would say this, but number one would be rapidly change the way we train journalists to work in such situations.
Thank you. So what are the other ways the society can help journalists that are reporting from and on Ukraine? That's the question for Jeremy, probably, because you started initiative for helping the journalists in Ukraine. What are your experiences? What is the kind of help that the people in Ukraine needs the most?
Well, I don't want to speak for the people really within the country, but what I have seen, there's been an enormous amount of media assistance flowing in. You know, I like Jakob, we've been in this field a long time with media development, and a lot of wars, a lot of conflicts, and so on. And I would probably say this is the most coordinated ever in terms of media assistance, and the numbers that have been raised as well. I said what we raised, but that's a really modest figure. The fix, I think some people know that the initiative that they raised over, I think, £1 million, the Kiev Independent over £1 million, and there are millions and millions of dollars. I'm not saying it's enough necessarily, but the organization called the Global Forum for Media Development has been organizing every 2 weeks meetings among donors, among those giving assistance, among Ukrainian journalistic organizations and unions, getting together online on Zoom every 2 weeks, and it's amazing what has actually been flowing in. Not just money to pay salaries, but medical equipment, protective equipment, assistance to journalists who have had to flee. The list goes on and on. So there are gaps, but I also spoke again to someone who's just a veteran of this type of stuff, and she said, yes, it's not perfect, but comparatively, there's a lot being done these days. I think going forward, and also to talking to people in the sector, it's where do we go from here? Because the money, the amounts I mentioned now sound huge, but if you talk to the people that raise that money, they say that this is just for 6 months, you know. And then again, the issue of fatigue, money still flowing in, what's going to happen after those 6 months run out? It's a lot of money to support the media now who have really lost many of their other income streams, advertising, whatever it might be. So people are going to have to keep the foot on the pedal and keep funding. And another person told me that he thinks this is going to eventually cause a whole remaking of the landscape of Ukrainian media, which Irina could probably comment on better than I could, but a lot of media are not going to recover long term from what's been going the last couple months. So I think that's the big question mark. You know, it's probably shifting, should be shifting a little bit away from emergency funding and more towards long-term support, psychological support for all the journalists that have been affected by covering the war, and looking forward and away from the emergency funding, which is still really important to some extent, but where do we go from here?
Thank you. You want to address?
No, I didn't want. I'm just asking. Like, but how do you do that in a war? Like, how do you make sure?
Make sure what?
How do you make sure to have a system or proper? Sorry. How do you make sure to have a system or a proper way of funding or anything that could sustain newsrooms in a country that's in a war? Like, I'm just wondering. I'm not asking you to.
No, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that all the money flowing has been used to keep these media alive, right? But at some point, hopefully the war is going to end, and what kind of financial models are going to work in a rebuilding Ukraine that in many places they're not going to have a local business infrastructure to even support those media. So what kind of models will work, and are the donors prepared to keep pumping in the funds to keep the media alive? I think, you know, it's a longer discussion, but there's the question of these bigger national media, but all the local and regional media. I think, you know, at last count, it was maybe 70 of them that had to close down. And what about those in the occupied territories as well? So it's a big question. We could do a panel just on that, I think.
Yeah, we would agree on that, because I think it's already high time to think about, you know, about the recovery phase. And now, I already told yesterday, you know, like the Ukraine as a state, we didn't manage to have any recovery program for the veterans. But now, not only veterans, but also the civilians. Half of the population is traumatized. And journalists are not an exclusion from that. You know, the stories they share, the stories they see, pictures, people they told to. So they also got their portion of trauma, and we will never know for how long they will somehow, you know, like, and then it might have their own, you know, recovery way. So it's not only important to provide some funding or for relocation, which is now funded by donors, a lot of them. You can apply for scholarships. You can find, you know, you can raise some money for relocation, but a number of local media really closed up. So what's going to be next? Whether they will come back, but we'll have to somehow provide good conditions for them, or at least some conditions to work, to keep working, to keep reporting on how the city that was sieged or not is now recovering. So there should be some local journalists, because they are the voices of the community. They have trust, and now we're also do this documenting stuff. But I know from my colleagues in Ukraine, human rights defender groups, people like witnesses, victims, they're more ready to talk with either human rights defenders, civil society activists, journalists, and share their stories. Not to the law enforcement bodies, agencies, prosecutors. So perhaps we, as the civil society and the media community, can also serve, as this bridge, gathering, collecting information, and then struggling for the international justice in ICC, in the Tribunal for Putin, or whatever the format may look like.
I just realized that we have 20 seconds left, and I have one more topic that I want to cover. Irene, I want to ask you, since you are working on establishing a center for documenting war crimes, how could you describe us your work, and how different is it from journalists reporting on war?
Actually, we are those intermediaries, or we plan to be the intermediaries between the victims and eyewitnesses and the prosecutor's office. Because, as I said, and we are operating, like we will be operating in Warsaw, because up to 3 million of Ukrainians still staying there. That's a huge number of, I don't like the word refugees, but internationally displaced people. And of course, this wave of migration is very specific, because in most cases they're just women and kids. And now they're all seeking for some psychological support, legal support, but they also need to have some sources where they can come and tell their stories, whether they witness something, whether they are victims of some war crimes. So basically, we are meant as a center to collect all those information, to collect the data, and then to provide this smooth adaptation and smooth dialogue with the prosecutor's body. Because we as a civil society or journalists, it's, of course, we can fight for the international justice, but this is not the role that we actually have to perform. We have the prosecutor's body for that, and let them do this job. With the start of the war, a lot of human rights defending groups also started to collect information. They were planning to apply to the ICC themselves. But in the long run, we all come up with a methodology that actually we cannot do this, because we can screw up the whole stuff. Everyone should do the job that they are professional in. Whether we're a civil society finding those grassroots, and collecting information, or journalists covering hot issues, explaining the roots of the problem, the roots of the war. Why? Because now, there's also this context that Ukraine and Russia have been, working together, living side by side for many years, and then the war somehow exploded. But it's not the case. And it's also for us, for the civil society, it's important to find those roots, how different we are in a cultural perspective, in a historical dimension, because different nations with different backgrounds, even different backgrounds for the last 20 years or even 10 years, Ukrainians struggling for independence and doing their job in having their own way to the democratic state. So basically, there is still a lot of stuff to be covered. And the main message is that we should facilitate the process, and finally to get this international justice in place at some point. I'm not saying that we will have it in a year or two, so we should also get ourselves prepared that it may take years, but let's get ourselves prepared for this process and to target the goal.
I have a lot more questions to ask, but we're out of time, so we will have to finish this session. Thank you all very much for being here, for sharing your stories. Thank you for the good and important work you're doing. Keep doing that. And I'm just, first of all, hoping that the war in Ukraine or the invasion of the Ukraine won't last long. And if it fortunately lasts long, I hope that we won't, as we discussed earlier prior to the discussion, that we won't get let's say, sick of it and kind of forget about it since the summer is coming and it's already 100 days and we know what happened with the pandemic, and let's just hope that it will end as soon as possible. Thank you all one more time.